Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane moves and the autumn moon is bright.
Hello, Fermented folks. This is Jeff C. Carter of We Bleed Orange and Black. On my show, we interview creators, discuss our favorite folklore, and share original spooky stories. But all this month, me and Fermented Fiction have been covering the Stoker Awards. Today, we're talking about superior achievement in short nonfiction. We've got Travis Vermeulen on the ones and twos, and Patrick Barb is here with us to chat about his essay, Deathwish, Wolfman, and nonfiction in general. And we have Moshaty here from Swingin' London, just in the nick of time. Patrick, why don't you tell the fine folks who you are?
Sure. I'm Patrick Barb. As Jeff said, I am an author of weird, dark, and horrifying fiction. My books include my novellas, Night of the Witch Hunter from Shortwave Publishing, The Nut House from Undertaker Books, and my debut novel, which came out last August, Abducted from Dark Matter Inc. And I also write nonfiction every now and then, so that's why I'm here.
That's why you're here, yeah. Forget all that other stuff. We're going to focus on the nonfiction today. We have another writer with us, Moshaty. What's good?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making time for me today. So I am Moshaty. I have been lecturing on horror and the horror genre, especially women's trauma within horror cinema for the last decade. I am a nonfiction writer for Rutledge, Lexington. I've talked about vampires. I've talked about witches. I'm in the Palgrave Handbook of the Zombie. And then with Darkest Margins, just did 24 essays of liminality and liminal horror. My essay for the Bram Stoker Award nominated essay is called Haunted Thresholds and deals with women in liminality and liminal horror in the genre. So yeah, it's really exciting to be here to talk about it.
So I want to break this interview into two halves. First, I want each of you to give us a summary about what your essay is about. And then from there, we're going to go down the ladder about nonfiction writing. Patrick, can you give us a summary about your piece?
My essay, Deathwish, Wolfman, was published with Interstellar Flight magazine. And the essay is basically tracing the history of the Wolfman character, the Larry Talbot, played by Lon Chaney Jr. character from the 1940s through the 1950s, when the character actually made his film appearances, ending with Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and then going into some of his other appearances subsequent in spin-off books and other types of fiction, just looking at how that character, in my sort of thesis of the piece, is the heart and the protagonist of the Universal Monsters sort of shared universe that's been around since the 30s, 40s, because it's a character who is both the hero and the monster, whereas somebody like Frankenstein's monster or the Gill Man, they're born into what they are. They don't change into a monster, or or on the other side of things, like a Dracula or the Invisible Man, are more malevolent. They're more evil inclined, whereas the Wolfman is just sort of pure id, pure instinct and everything. And so looking at that character as the sort of focal point of those movies and the relationships of those classic monsters, also sprinkling in a little bit of detail from my own life and my own sort of relationship with monsters and my relationship with horror through the lens of the Wolfman.
Mo, can you pick the central premise of your essay? Because you have a lot of examples, and I would love to drill down into one or two of them maybe a bit later.
Sure. Well, the essay is really about how women find themselves in liminal spaces all the time, interior and exterior spaces. So we go through, we look at motherhood, we look at the maiden mother crone aspect, we look at the Madonna and horror aspect. So the women always have to be in certain places and in between and straddling the line of individuality and what society wants them to be. And horror is a really good gateway to talk about those stories, because we always find women mostly central to the story. And then also finding out, what society's monster is on women at that particular time. So you can always sort of find where it would rather have women sit as opposed to embracing who they actually are. So horror delves into a lot of that, and women find themselves in those spaces all the time.
My next question about nonfiction, about your essays in particular, how did you choose that subject for that essay? And more generally, how do you go about deciding, okay, this is a juicy topic? Patrick?
Yeah. So part of the essay with Deathwish Wolfman, another part of the premise was that not only is the Wolfman the protagonist, but it's a tragic hero, somebody who is driven by what essentially wanting to kill himself. After the first appearance, every time the Wolfman shows up, gets brought back to life, all he wants to do is either get a cure or actually die and stay dead. And so once I sort of had this sort of pet theory, it's like, oh, that might make a good essay. Let me just watch every single Wolfman movie that's ever been made, and then let me read every single spin-off book or like licensed Universal Studios licensed somebody in the 90s, Jeff Roven, to write a Return of the Wolfman book. Let me read all that. Let me read any sort of short story that has even a whiff of Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, mentioned in it. So that took me a couple of years, actually,
Wow.
to go through everything and sort of get the sort of premise down and sort of get my notes together. Um, just kind of absorbing it all, really. And then after that, I wrote the essay. I knew it was going to be longer than some of the other stuff I've written. I've written some movie reviews. I've written some like shorter pieces on some movies, mostly movies in this case. And I reached out to the folks at Interstellar and asked if they wanted to publish it. They usually do more contemporary movies, books, etc. So I knew this was kind of out of their standard wheelhouse or what they usually like to publish, but I had a working relationship with them. So it would, they said yes and went up on the website, I think early October of last year. And then obviously made it to the long list and then the short list here of the finalists for the short nonfiction. So that's kind of the origin. Really long birth, I guess, or creation, and then just thrown out into the world, and here we are.
Another overnight success from Patrick
Exactly.
Barb. Mo, how about you? How did you land on this particular topic for your essay?
Ooh, well, everyone knows that I am the trauma lady. So, I mean, it's not a huge leap into what I usually discuss in my work. But what was really interesting about this essay is the fact of the liminal space. I mean, liminal is getting a lot of buzz right now. We're looking at A24's back rooms, like just and all of those analog horrors from middle knots to now, and we're sort of looking at what that means. And I really wanted to look at it at a way of where as women we tend to get really stuck, and like I had said before, in several different spaces in our life where we're the teen, we're the bride, we're the maid mother crone, and there's two different things that made the very completely non-horror things that made me kind of centralize what I wanted to talk about in this story. And if anyone out there has seen First Wives Club, there is a scene where Goldie Hawn says there's only three roles a woman can have in Hollywood. It's I think it's babe, mother, or district attorney, and that's all she can do and that's all she can be. And it was Britney Spears' I'm not a girl yet not a woman song that came out, and it's like, there's so many ways that women try to tell society, like, you have me in 8 different buckets and I can't succeed at all of them. What do you want from my life? And I really looked at where women sit in those situations within horror. So within my essay, I really discussed something like Saint Maud. So Saint Maud is stuck between where she was living a quote unquote normal life as a emergency nurse, has this horrible medical accident, and now she has turned to religious fanaticism. And through that religious fanaticism, she cannot understand that she isn't sainted, and she doesn't belong in the world, and she isn't masterful, and she isn't influential in all of these things that she thinks that she can be. And looked at something like a film called She Dies Tomorrow, where there's a woman who is very much convinced that she's going to die very soon. And that particular dread creeps through the rest of the women that she encounters with. And it's sort of how this permeation of the idea of women's hysteria is mass, or it's permeable throughout nature, and women sort of feed off each other that way. And looking into Silent Hill 3, the video game Silent Hill 3, which is the whole story is really based on, we're going to impregnate you because we need our God. I hope that's okay with you. And it's, she's caught in between this decision that's being made for her. So I always say that, and I talk about the red tree, and I talk about, motherhood in horror, and grief in horror. I talk about 7 different pieces within this essay, but it's really speaking about how the choices that are made for us, and the roles that are forced upon us as women are really horrific. I mean, society wise, we're looking at a whole lot of really awful things that are sort of forced upon us through our government, through our laws, through society at large, through magazines, through TikTok, through wellness things like be the best you. This is the diet that's going to work for you right now. I made a list of things that I really wanted to touch on, and it was based on what we sort of face in that space. When I talk about liminality, I'm not talking about, being stuck in an old mall. I'm talking about, the space of, having to be in something that you've entered but not of your own volition. It's, you're sort of caught and been pulled into that. And it was based on a few figures that I saw that I was working with throughout this essay. And a few of them are a few things that women have to go through. And one is sexualization at a young age, lack of reproductive care and advocacy, lack of adequate mental health care. The American Psychiatric Association removed hysteria from its diagnostic statistical manual of mental disorders as late as 1980. So you can still lock your wife up in 1979 and tell the world that she's crazy because she had her own opinion. Women go through genital mutilation globally, human trafficking, forced pregnancy, sexual slavery, marital rape, lack of access to positions of power, the patriarchy, lack of respect for caregiving, and internalized racism and misogyny. So, I mean, if you ask women where they feel that they should fit with all of that, and what's forced upon us with all of that, horror film and horror books and horror video games give us such a beautiful outlet to explore all of that. And it was just I cherry picked a few of my favorites that were so visual on the page, and is the ways that the world sort of traps women between here and nowhere.
So Patrick detailed a sort of a through line. There was one thread he was tracking down for years for his research, whereas you were pulling from video games, movies, books. Did you seek out particular stuff to try to refine your thesis?
No, like I said, I've been doing this for a decade. So I've already ran into these particular topics before. And I mean, let's be honest, you don't have to dig too deep to find places where women are uncomfortable in the horror genre. Like it's not like we have to find, it's not like I had to find something to fit my point to make the point true. The scariest thing is about how women exist in the world is that we don't have to look too far for oppression. We don't have to look too far for violation. We don't have to look too far for societal pressures, patriarchal control. It's not out of our reach. It's not anything that we have to mine too deep in order to satisfy a point. Any woman could rattle off to you what she's been through in her life, and the disparities within society. But I think for me, it was just like, you know what all of these say is that there are so many places women feel they need to be. One, two, they're forced in those situations. If we're looking at just as an example of Silent Hill 3, just sort of not given the choice, being like, well, this is what's happening to you and you better play ball, or X, Y, and Z. So I think for me, it was a really easy, you just kind of looking through my travels and the oodles of films that I've watched, the games that I've played, the books that I've read, that really focus on a lot of giving us a lot of the same message, is that women are usually stuck between being able to have the choice and the choice being taken away from them.
Was there a challenge of having too much material for one essay?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything that didn't make the cut?
Yeah, there was a lot. There was, especially the way my brain works. I have ADHD, so I mean, if there's 21
We know.
plates to
We
spin,
know,
I'm
Mo.
gonna spin 'em, okay? But it's the fact that it's, what I really wanted to do was give really thorough examples of breaking it down to each one. I mean, we looked at motherhood, we looked at grief, we looked at religious fanaticism, we looked at hysteria. And I think those four buckets I landed on because I think that it is something that not just women experience. I mean, if you take motherhood as a whole and parenthood as a whole, it's not, hysteria is not something that, there's a time in our lives where all of us have maybe not been believed immediately. There's a time in our lives where maybe parenthood was hard, being a child was hard, having hard parents was hard. We've grieved somebody that has died or somebody that is maybe still alive. We've dealt with religion at some point in our lives. Maybe it was great. Maybe it was a really horrifying experience. So I really wanted to not only envelope my point of women's struggle with liminality on the interior, but also make it more of a inviting material that anyone could really engage with.
That makes sense. Patrick, do you think in terms of essays versus stories, or do you just get ideas and you think, okay, this would make a better essay than a story?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's because I don't write nonfiction as much as Mo does. I'm not dealing in that particular mode as often. Usually, if an idea comes to me and it's based on a piece of media, a lot of times that tends to be where the nonfiction writing I do stems from. And then once that idea is in place, I kind of know it's nonfiction from the jump. It's not going to be something where I'm like, oh, let me filter this through a story and add an extra layer. At the same time, I feel like when I'm plotting out a review or I'm plotting out an essay, I tend to be more of a planner for nonfiction than I am for fiction. Fiction's a lot of like pantsing, just sort of like making it up as I go, having sort of idea of where I want to go and letting it flow. Opposite almost for nonfiction, where I need to have every single piece, every single like section that I want to have. And then I sort of start outlining it, setting like, here's a section, here's subsection, here's subsections. And it's like mapping it out that way. And then once I have that structure, it's just a matter of saying, okay, these facts that I've gathered, these opinions that I've gathered, this sort of like interpretation, let's put them together in this order. And then, once that's done, let's see what we've got versus like fiction where it's just like, let the words flow and then it'll go from there.
Mo, how about you? Do you recognize immediately when something is an essay or when it's a story, or do some things sometimes live liminally between the two where you're like, this could go either way?
Look at you with your liminal things. No, I mean, pretty much to what Patrick was saying, I have a similar style where I want to make sure that, my nonfiction pieces come from being Mo babble to actually like linear thought. So I do a lot of research, just kind of relying on old research that I've done, or sort of picking up a piece of that and running with it anew. But yeah, fiction is very much. I am also a chronological like pantster. I will do it from beginning to end. But what I love about the process of nonfiction is that there's so much to think about in the horror genre. And it's not just, I mean, me predominantly, I come from the screenwriting world. So obviously running to cinema, into literary was sort of a natural progression for me. But what I love about the nonfiction piece is that there's so much to chat about within horror, within the genre, within to even like to Patrick's essay, which is fantastic. We're looking at pre-code horror, and starting at that point. There's just so much richness in it. There's so much to chat about. I run a magazine where I get to make analytical essays all day. I mean, it's a fun thing to do, but I think you definitely have to sit back and say, this is something either that's been floating in my mind that I want to look into and expand more. This is my kernel of an idea where I'm interested and I'm trying to self-educate. And if I can wrap that in a package where I'm also educating others, that's where the nonfiction goes. Or places like, especially with Clairviolence that I put out last year, a lot of those stories started out from being watching something that was along that genre surface which is my incidentally my interspecies sex story, far flung from nonfiction, is because I had come off watching something like, Swamp Thing or Lure or something like that to kind of sparks an idea. So I guess for me, it's very delineated. Like I know this just belongs in a more of a deep diving analytical piece, and this is like, oh, this is where this belongs. So I definitely try to cut myself off from it being like a 3,000 word analytical essay and just a really fun story at the end.
Patrick, do you also get that bounce where you're writing a short story and then you're like, hey, there could be a good essay here, or you're doing tons of research on something like the Wolfman and you're like, I gotta write my own Wolfman book?
I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely that aspect of it. I think where you're both parts of your brain are going to be firing if you're doing the research and you're digging into a topic and it's occupying your mind for that length of time. I think there's a part of you that's saying, okay, this is the essay, this is the sort of critical analysis, this is the more of that side of who I am as a not just a writer, but like a consumer of fiction, a consumer of these movies, as Mo was saying, from like pre-code, and then how am I in the year 2025, 2026 interacting with this material? What am I bringing to the table with it? So I feel like when I do an essay like that, there's a fair amount of memoir as well. It's not entirely in the academic space. For me, I have to like sort of have that, here's me personally as the author inserting myself into this examination, because I can't divorce myself from me as the kid watching monster movies in the second grade or the third grade. And then at the same time, once I have all these ideas, once I've read all these books, watched all these movies, filtered them through the process of writing the essay, what's great, I think, is for all the kernel of an idea you start with for that thesis, you're going to have new information, new insights that come from the process of writing. Even as much as I outline an essay and have the sort of subsections all mapped out, there's still those moments of like, oh, and I could say this. This is something I just occurred to me, and then you take those sort of insights. Once it's written, once it's out there, it's like, well, I have extra energy. There's still stuff left to go. There's still stuff left to say. Let me filter this through fiction, because I've said everything in my voice. I've said everything through the sort of critical lens. Let's squeeze a little bit more juice out of it.
I want to pull a piece out of your essay and toss it to the whole panel, Travis included. Your essay is called Deathwish Wolfman because you're looking at Larry Talbot, but do you have any kind of distinction between Wolfman stories and werewolf stories? Is it important that there is an upright canine hominid hybrid with a short nose who looks a little more human, as opposed to like a giant grizzly bear looking thing that's just like blasting through walls?
Sure, yeah, the underworld and like Van Helsing style CGI werewolf. No, I responded to the character of the Wolfman from the first time seeing Frankenstein meets. I mentioned this in the essay. My art teacher in elementary school, across 3 sessions of art, showed us Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. That was my first exposure to like the Universal monsters. This was be like early '90s, so early '90s, I want to say, and then it was sort of following this resurgence of Universal monsters popularity. They were re-releasing all the movies on VHS of all things, which I had the whole collection of over I got them all from Suncoast Video or wherever they were coming from. And I fell in love with that particular character. There was something about the transformation scene, which obviously has inspired a lot of other werewolf transformation scenes. The character himself, who, looking back now on the Larry Talbot character as presented in the Wolfman, the original Wolfman, is a creep. It's kind of a weird, creepy, very overbearing, taking up a lot of space, especially around the woman he's quote unquote courting. And, you know, I felt like that character was so interesting. And looking at it from the lens of today, I think part of that premise I was coming up with was that he the reason why I responded to that character was because he started out as human. There is that human element to the character. He doesn't want to be a monster, and yet he's cursed with this sort of being who he is through circumstances, through these like unfortunate series of events. And who, like, I don't necessarily know that we can all feel like we're like an aristocratic count or a monster made out of dead body parts, or, you know,
Some days.
a scientist who wraps himself up in bandages and blows up a train. I just want to like point out in the Invisible Man, he blows up a whole train of people. Not a great guy. Um, I feel like there's a lot to identify with that character, and that particular character versus the generic werewolf character. Whereas I think a lot of what the Wolfman, what that character presented, has carried through to other werewolf portrayals, whether it be American Werewolf in London, Ginger Snaps, etc. There's sort of those certain character elements that Larry Talbot character established when going up against characters, Frankenstein, Dracula, all had a literary background. They had come from prose and made into film. The characters might be different from the book version, but they still had that origin. Whereas the Wolfman character is the like 100% original creation in that Universal Monsters family.
Even the eventual inclusion of silver as a weakness comes from the cinematic universe. And to me, that is like the final thing that sort of crystallizes the werewolf mythos. And it doesn't come from folklore necessarily. Mo, you've written about zombies and vampires and witches. Have you ever done a deep dive on wolfmen versus werewolves?
No, not yet. But what's really interesting about, what's really beautiful about the pieces in Patrick's essay is about the humanity of it. Like it really is, you know, we're dealing with something something terrible happens to this human man, and now the story really begins, and how either he bests it or lets it best him. And I feel like that's something that's really humanly relatable. But what's really cool about the cinematic piece of the Wolfman being like a very sympathetic character in something like Dog Soldiers, which is that like bipedal, you know, craziness that happens upon this like crew of men, is that it's very non-sympathetic, but very pack-like. What's interesting about the Wolfman is it's very solitary. It's incredibly solitary, which is really isolating and really terrifying in any stretch for any human, and a human slash now wolf. And there's no relation to other people. So it has a take of feeling, you know, quite lonely, where you have, you know, something like, you know, the lycanthropes of Underworld, or, you know, even like the Howling, which lives in my brain because I saw that when I was really too little to see it, and it was terrifying. But D. Wallace forever. But also, no, I haven't yet. But I think that there's such a strong demarcation between the two when you look at it from a humanity piece, which is, again, there's too much richness in horror to not talk about it all.
Patrick, have you ever seen The Beast Must Die?
That's the one that has the like ending where they pause and let you try to guess who the werewolf is.
Yeah.
I saw that on AMC, like Monster Vision, like one of those Halloween marathons back in the day.
That movie rips. It is so awesome. It's the closest we've ever gotten to like a black exploitation werewolf movie. It's a whodunit. At one point, they like put a wolf mask on like a German Shepherd and just like throw it through a window. But like effects aside, it really is a great movie with a great cast. When they were doing like Blackula and Blackenstein, there was supposed to be a like Werewolf of Watts movie, and it never got made. So like the closest we're ever going to get to that is Beast Must Die, or there's a hip hop group called Binary Star that has a song about the Wolfman that is incredible. Maybe I'll have to drop it into the podcast version.
Once upon a midnight dream, I see the full moon clearly. The wind sounds ill, don't it chill your spine? And And don't these shadows make you live? Cause with darkness, dirt, the place of birth of the evil man's work. Who's the man? Some cat named Jack, last name unknown. Anti-socialist, barely left his home. He don't say much, big full blown. He don't shave much. Nights like tonight, he would rather stay up instead of going to sleep. He's in the dark of the streets. He has a
Travis, do you have any thoughts about Wolfman versus Werewolf, the animatronic special effect?
Yeah, I actually love the way Patrick voiced it. For anyone who hasn't listened to our show, my academic background is in theology. So I study a lot of like Catholic Church history and kind of the theological philosophy of the medieval times. And so looking into the folklore and stuff, when I was reading Patrick's essay, I was thinking about the difference of a lot of the times the way we want to view it in that specific academic sphere is through the lens of the demonic, and how sort of zombies, vampires, werewolves, all of that being different iterations of, demonic possession. And I think the werewolf is so important. And I think, Patrick, you're right that the Wolfman, I think, is this really important iteration of that, because that's like the demonic possession of almost accident, of like you're walking through something dark into your base nature and it takes over. And so there is this level of like humanity that's still there. And I loved how you voiced the man just wants to be cured. He wants to be back. He wants to be rid of the possession. Whereas the vampire is like someone who sought the demonic, like looked for it, wanted it, embraced it, became it. And then the zombie is almost like an outside force acting upon something, like usually a resurrection of some sort. Like, so I do think the like animatronic CGI werewolf doesn't quite capture that as much in the movies that I've seen. Especially, I love that you reference Underworld, because I almost try to with the one character. I am the worst with names. Someone help me. He's like the main Wolfman guy who's in love. And
Scott Speedman?
and yes. No,
That's the
not Scott
actor.
Speedman.
Scott
Uh,
Speedman is the actor.
yes, but the other guy, not Scott Speedman. He's in like the prequel.
Mo, help me out.
We're gonna have to IMDb that later. I'm just
Yeah,
keep going,
IMDb
Rabbit.
later. He's in the prequel. He's like the head of the werewolves in the first movie.
Michael
And I think
Sheen?
he dies. Yes, Michael Sheen's character.
Okay.
He almost like tries to capture that original Wolfman-esque thing of, oh, he's just a man who was pining for a woman and was cursed, and the vampires hate him, and but it doesn't quite capture it. I don't think it leans too far into the action aspect and makes them just kind of monsters that don't have that internal human struggle that Patrick captured in his essay. So that'd be my thought.
On a personal note, my journey with Underworld is I saw a trailer and I was like, holy shit, vampires versus werewolves, this is going to be awesome. Expectations were really high, and I went in and I was like, oh, they're just sad, droopy goths hanging out in one house. Okay. And then they released a sequel, and so I lowered my expectations, and it was incredible. And I was like, holy shit, it blew me away. And then a third movie came out, and I was like, all right, expectations high. And then I was like, oh man, what a letdown. And like Underworld taught me about setting expectations and how it affects my experience of movies. But anyway, Mo, we're going to cherry pick something from your essay real quick. You have a line among hundreds of incredible lines in this essay. The female body, cyclic and porous, becomes the abject incarnate, something to be hushed, healed, or hidden. What is it like trying to blend this style of, you have a scholarly argument, you are quoting things from critical theory, but you're also playing with the words, polishing them, making them land for effect. It's not a term paper that you're writing something that has a little more of a style and a gloss to it.
Well, yeah, I'm a woman. I write from a woman's perspective. So I mean, I think that for me, it's if we're speaking are we speaking in just style difference between our essays, or what are you looking for me to see here?
I'm just saying that there's a lot of craft and style in your essay. It's not just
Yeah.
these are 5 examples that I'm pointing to that support a
Yeah.
thesis. It's a really interesting read because there's so much poetry in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really approached this essay as sort of, I mean, it it doesn't seem like it on the surface when you read it, because we do talk about a lot of abjection. I do reference Julia Kristeva and the abject of being like the monstrosity piece, the leaking bodies, blood, menopause. Like we go through all of that, but it really was my love letter to women in some sort of way, and really speak to how we are, and I say it in my essay that women have been given the proverbial middle plane seat in life. We're sort of kind of squished to our barriers and our parameters, and I think I really wanted to be as deep and emotional as possible. I mean, there were parts writing through this essay that I cried, because especially as someone who is a mother, and that aspect, just what I've gone through and what the expectations are, and how quickly you're supposed to bounce back. And my parenthood started off in the late 90s. We had Us Weekly, and it's like, look how quick these stars bounce back. She just had her baby 2 weeks ago. Does she look great with her 6-pack abs? And then we're sitting here just like the job of the hut in our house, like trying to just figure out life and who this little human being is. So I really wanted to just keep it as deeply emotional, and as, I guess, it came off poetic inadvertently. I mean, I
Mm.
really wasn't trying to be very flowery with it. I think I sort of adapted a little bit of this gothic mentality, or this gothic retelling of the situations of these women, because that's sort of where the information and the research found me, is that we go really far back in, yeah, we're talking about something like Saint Maud that didn't come out too long ago, and we're looking at religious fanaticism from a woman's perspective of being like, I caused a death, and now from this point on, I am just giving life lessons and giving life assurance, and I am the divine one, and I am chosen, and I do have a purpose, and without this purpose, I am nothing. And I think that that encompasses a lot of what women feel sometimes. If I'm not the best mom, if I'm not the best teacher, if I'm not the best daughter, if I'm not the best friend, if I'm not the best wife, if I'm not the best girlfriend, if I'm not the best me, who am I and where do I fit in? There's always something to fix with women, right? We scroll through TikTok. There's a new diet, there's a new makeup trick, there's a new, hairstyle, there's a new fashion style. You don't want to get left behind. You want to be doing what's on trend, and there's never a way for us to catch up. And even with the way, our bodies work, I mean, giving forth life, having periods, I mean, it's a messy job being a woman. And I think that that is very much, if we talk about that line you were speaking of, we're talking about hushed. I mean, I just touched on the fact that hysteria was an offense that a woman could be charged with to get put away into a sanitarium as late as 1980. I mean, women were put away for hysteria for being disagreeable to their husbands. There's crime reports back as far as were documented, where women just were just a little bit out of sorts, or were not agreeable enough, or were too opinionated, and they were silenced. We were silenced through our government. Took us forever to reach a vote, or women to be able to vote. Hidden, are we're not supposed to, sorry, bug. We're not supposed to show our roles, or our cellulite, or our graying hair. We're supposed to keep those things hidden and only show the good parts. So I think for me it was a really big love letter to the struggles that we go through, and in the framing of horror films that talked about fanaticism and hysteria and motherhood and grief and forced pregnancy and forced sexuality, and and desire of this, prepubescent model of being cherubic looking all the time and not embracing what women's wrinkles are. And, we're very quick as a society to touch on how women are aging inappropriately and how much weight they're gaining, and men get to be distinguished and get to be salt and pepper daddies. It's a very weird dichotomy that we're always in. So I think it just naturally came off really poetic and really sympathetic, because I was sort of crushed at looking at. I mean, like I said, I've been researching this for decades, so it's not any news to me. But I think it was very sort of soul crushing as I wrote it, and I couldn't help but be poetic about it, I guess.
Well, it's a fantastic read. Can you recommend any other nonfiction pieces that sort of inspired you to work in that mode, or any other nonfiction pieces from this year or other years that you want to shout out?
Oh, yeah. There is Scared Sacred through House of Leaves Publishing, which talks a lot about pieces like Haksan, talks about like witches and ecofeminism, talks about religious fanaticism. Simon Bacon, who is a wonderful friend of mine, did that I had a piece in, but there's also really incredible pieces within this book. It's called Toxic Nostalgia on Screen. So it talks about how, cinema reached for like the good old days where sort of women would shut the hell up, I guess. And you touched on religious horror, just something that might pique your interest, or you might already know about it. Travis is my dear friend Matt Rogerson, who is the publisher at 1428, where Darkest Margins comes from, has a book out called Vatican versus Horror Movies, where it talks about the church against horror movies and things that they had gone through. But I think those are really just been my recent favorites. Anything from Alexandra Heller Nicholas is fantastic. Really, really deep diving into that. There's trying to think which is really great. Scared Sacred is here. Slasher books. Probably can't see this. Slasher movies. This is all nonfiction work about it.
All right.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's an A to Z guide of more than 60 years of blood and guts. So pick that up if you want to. It's such a great read.
Wow.
But yeah, there's a lot of work in the nonfiction sphere, especially in horror, and I'm so grateful because it really speaks to a lot. I'm drawing a complete blank on it, and I'll never forgive myself for not remembering the full title of this. But there is one that just came out. I think it was either last year or the year before, regarding A Nightmare on Elm Street, which was really, really lovely. It came from The Closet, which speaks to LGBTQ horror in the horror genre. So yeah, I mean, I could turn my computer and you can see my level of things that are here.
That a different
Newman.
podcast.
Yeah, Nightmare Movies by Kim Newman. Yeah,
Oh,
lots
nice.
of things.
Patrick, how about you? Were you inspired by any nonfiction pieces, or are there any you want to shout out?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, there's a lot of ways to get nonfiction content, especially in the horror space. There's a lot of fantastic writing online. I mean, Mo's Night Tide magazine does a great job covering specific sort of overarching horror topics and letting people write in different ways about them. And other people like Zach Gillen is another critic who writes a lot of like critical pieces about weird fiction and sort of exploring how they, you know, uh, having this sort of critical eye towards contemporary fiction, which I think is really important and interesting at this time where, I was listening to Mo talk about sort of her essay and, you know, looking at these older pieces, looking at these more contemporary pieces. Basically, every time you write a piece of nonfiction, I feel like you are as much engaging with the work of the past as you are commenting on the current moment. And I think with both of our pieces, there is commentary on whether it's the personal, the societal, the cultural, our fellow nominees in that category, all from the Why I Love Horror book, which is fantastic. Each of those is, it's a personal essay in those cases, and they are looking at people's origin stories of why they love horror or what horror means to them. And again, it's no matter where you're coming from or what you're looking at, how far back you're looking, you're still writing about this moment right now. So like and then as a reader, when you engage with this stuff, you are engaging with it from not just when it was written, but also from what you're bringing to bear on it from the present day. So looking back at some essays in books, I think about The Weird, that big compendium of weird fiction, weird horror, those little essays by the Vandermeers that are before each story that's there. There's a lot to be gleaned from that. And, just I'm the person who gets the special editions like the Vinegar Syndrome and the Severin films and gets the booklet out and just like flips through it and reads before I put the movie on because I want to kind of get that contextualization. And then you're also seeing it from, again, where you're at.
That makes me think of liner notes. That makes me think of media literacy and how much of that goes away when everything is streaming. But then we've also got the fucking discourse, which is the conversation about the conversation about the conversation, which is not the same as media literacy. It's just reactions ping-ponging off each other in echo chambers. I'm not passionate about that at all, you can tell. When do you think we got away from engaging on a meta level with the things we read, write, create, enjoy, to when it was all taken out of our hands in an analog sense and beamed at us digitally? Now we're all invited to join in the conversation about it, but there's no nutritional value in the conversation around these things. Travis, I'm throwing to you. Surprise.
I'm trying to grasp exactly kind of what you're
if there was a point in there.
Yeah, no, there was definitely a point, and I think I got it, but I don't want to answer the wrong question. So could you give it to me again?
Do you think that media literacy has declined as we've moved from analog to digital? We've gotten away from liner notes, context, more nuanced criticism into just a always on digital discourse about everything that's coming out?
I would say yes. I call myself a curmudgeon always. But I think the answer is in the question. And it's as we've moved on to the purely digital community, which does great things. I will never be curmudgeon-y enough to say like, oh, get rid of it all. But like I have a flip phone for a reason. I think there's been a lot of harm, and the harm that's been done, especially to like the media literacy thing, is I think what used to happen with art, whether it be movies, books, more often was it was in community, person to person. So like going to cons and like meeting people, I now have a face to the story, to the essay, and even if I disagree with it, I've had a conversation with the person, and I've had to like think through, oh, okay, well, there's someone there behind the words, instead of I'm just going to take my opinion of this thing and like put it into what you call my echo chamber and get all this feedback of people that think exactly like me. And I think sometimes this like idea of community gets unfairly associated with just like the rural, because I lived in inner city Philadelphia for a while, and that was a community where like your city block, you're meeting people who maybe you don't have the same opinions with, but you see them on a daily basis. You go to the same corner store. And I think when it comes to media literacy and like horror especially, which is such a divisive genre in the first place, it's harder to truly engage on like a heavily intellectual level, I think, with anything, if you don't have people who are going to challenge you on the views that you're kind of putting forth and challenge you on the personal, where it's not like hey, this person just said something on my YouTube comment and I can just turn that off if I want and never look at it again. It's rather like my brother and I that run our show together have a lot of different opinions. But like I got to see that guy at Christmas. So like I can't just be like dismissive of him entirely. I have to wrestle with the things that he's challenging my thought processes on. I have to wrestle with that, and that builds a better like critique in me and probably makes me a much more genuine me to have that challenge in the personal level.
And it
I
deepens your
hope
media
that we-
literacy
yeah,
because you're
it
not
deepens the media-
ducking the conversation, you're engaging with
Yep.
it. Mo, Night Tide has got to be like a bulwark against the Twitterification of hot takes, right?
I hope. I think to sort of piggyback off of something that Travis had said is I think that first of all, media literacy is beating the brakes off people every day. Like it's just like they cannot get a handle on it at all. Because we have two different schools of thought right now. We've lost our communal piece where it's, you go to the movies with someone, you have a chat about it, you see your friends more, you see people that have differing opinions, and you get to chat about it. We don't get to do that a lot. I actually have a scheduled Zoom to talk to my friends across the world tomorrow because we don't get to do that. But also, what's happening is there is this thing where we have almost like an oligarchical media mentality, right? So we get somebody with a lot of followers that says the thing,
Yeah.
and then that thing sort of permeates, and then that thing sort of trickles down. So how social media works when you're trying to get like clicks and stuff like that is the general idea. Then like 14 people also say that general idea,
Yep.
and then those people say that general idea. So it does get sort of like watered down, and the point definitely gets we bury the lead really quickly because we just really want to push our point. But what I hope that Night Tide does is that it helps to like we're not horror news churn. You're never going to get like up to the minute. I just don't have time. Like, I don't have the time. I can barely keep myself together. I don't know what's happening in horror every minute. But our whole point was to really look at horror in a different way, to really deep dive, not make it surface level. Like you're never going to see us do just an anniversary special and be like, shout out to this movie that's 40 years old. It's like, why are we
Mhm.
talking about it? What is the discourse now? Like, how does it age? Like, what is this thing going on? But I also feel like on the other side of that, as a as a an outlet who is run 100% by women of color led. Like I am the editor in chief. I'm the founder of this. I do have a staff that writes for me periodically, but most of the stuff is kind of put through. I read every pitch. I edit every article. Like I do the things. But there are I have to turn off comments because some comments are racist.
Mhm.
Some comments are sexist. Some
Mhm.
comments are anti-trans. Some comments are anti-LGBTQ. I don't need to have that on my feed. I can turn that off and be like, no, because that's not going to happen on my watch. So I think that there is definitely I don't need to engage with those kind of
Yeah.
people. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't need to have the back and forth. I don't need to prove anything to you. You're not going to care anyway. So it's a waste of time because really the important thing is we're talking about horror films. We're talking about horror literature, talking about horror performance. So the personal feelings of it become less autobiographical and actually just more pointed and mean. So again, media literacy. It's not there. It's just there to sort of be an anchor to something else people want to get, say, or push their agenda or their point with. So it does get really hard to just stay on topic sometimes, especially when there's such amazing art being made in the indie space, in the indie horror space. Most of us will go through our writing career not being with a top 5 publisher. Just saying, still waiting for your master of horror to endorse black and brown authors because that's not happening.
Mhm.
So nobody's writing our blurbs, nobody's writing our introductions. So I mean, it's if we can really just get back to brass tacks and celebrate art the way that it is and be more communal and have actual real-time conversations about it as opposed to yeah, I'm responding to a feed that already has 157 comments to it. It takes the fun out of it, right? So I do hope we de-Twitterize the horror sphere, I guess. I hope that was really kind. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to Fermented Fiction as well. I think they also bring on an incredibly wide spectrum of people from different genres to
Thanks.
chop it up, and everything's on the table. If you really want to see how deep the rabbit holes go, you should all be tuning in to Fermented Fiction.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
I was just going to say, just to piggyback on what everybody else has been saying, I think with a lot of the social mediaification of consumption of entertainment, it's very ephemeral in a lot of ways. There's very short memories. It's all, it's hot takes right away. Nothing is ever given like even like a lukewarm take or a cold take. And that's where these publications like Night Tide and like some of the columns in Weird Horror magazine from Undertow, where they have a chance to step back and like consider a piece or several pieces in a context, in a history. I feel like there's new like articles about like this is the return of horror or something like that. It's like, well, it's been returning for, you know so like let's, I appreciate when we have the opportunity to look at these things without it just being an immediate reaction, without it being like an immediate response. And I think that's what's sometimes missing from, like you said, Jeff, like not having the physical media, not having like a library of books or a library of movies on your shelf to be able to say like, oh, this is like, I can trace something here visually just by looking at it and seeing like how these movies have changed things or what's been the pattern there. Whereas when it's social media, it's all like, what's the new thing? What's the immediate thing that's happened? Comment on that and then move on. I think that we lose something when we don't take the time to like look back at things and look at it in context and use that not only as a way to analyze the current moment, but as a way to project outward, both in terms of what can go wrong and in terms of like what our hopes and dreams are the for the genre, for the people working in the genre, for like where that path can go and forming a sort of more solid vision of it.
Yeah, we stand on an ice cold take here on Fermented Fiction and We Bleed Orange and Black.
Yeah.
Mo, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. Where can people find you online and get all your stuff?
I am on really only on Blue Sky and Instagram at Moshaty, so Moshaty. I'm not on the artist formerly known as Twitter anymore, just simply because I don't want to be. But you can find me at moshaty.com. That's where you can purchase my book through all the links there. Nighttidemag.com, where you can see our horror journal. I'm usually out and about. You can find me next talking with Seed Talks on June 16th after Stoker. I'm going to be talking about, surprise, surprise, female horror, female trauma and horror cinema. But yeah, I'll be lecturing out through the rest of the year, and I have a piece of surprise news coming in the literary space in a little bit. So I'm really excited to share that, but I can't right now, but I will very soon.
All right. Nice tease. Patrick, where can we get all your stuff and find you online?
Sure. There's a couple places like Mo, mainly Blue Sky and Instagram, patrickbarb.bsky.social, whatever the thing is. Just look up Patrick Barb on Blue Sky. You'll find me. Instagram is Patrick_Barb. My website is patrickbarb.com, where you can find links to my short fiction and my books as well to buy them. And also, I'd say if people want to get a little bit more nonfiction from me, it's Shortwave magazine. I have a sort of monthly column called Your Favorite Author's Favorite Author, where in each installment, I interview a different sort of contemporary author, mostly genre, mostly horror, about who their favorite author is, using that as a springboard to kind of get into their development as an author and an artist, and how that work from the past or one of their contemporaries, whoever their favorite might be, has sort of been in conversation with their own development as an author. And I got a bunch up there. I think there's over 20 or more at this point. So yeah, check that out as well for a little bit of more Patrick nonfiction.
Travis, are you prepared to give all the socials for Fermented Fiction?
Most of them, I think. I think we're just at Fermented Fiction on most things. I believe Clayton has us on Instagram, Blue Sky, maybe Twitter. I don't know. I'm the flip phone guy. I got rid of all of it, and I just rely on my brother to do the technological side stuff. But on Substack is our main thing. So if you go to Substack, you'll see all our episodes released there as well. And we have a partner that me and my friend Zebediah built, Meathead Media. We write movie reviews, and with our friend Kent as well. All three of us have a passion for watching movies and lifting heavy things. So we made a thing together.
I think that was a pretty good survey of short nonfiction. I look forward to seeing all you guys at StokerCon. Best of luck to your superior achievements. And this is Jeff C. Carter signing off for We Bleed Orange and Black and Fermented Fiction. Thanks for listening. Links are in the show notes. Please subscribe and follow. You can find me at jeffcccarter.com and pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.
Terrible things, Lawrence. You've done terrible things.